Hey, you want to play truth or dare? How about 20 questions? How about this? We do a little bit of both on our next podcast. Kristi and I are going to talk about partnerships. And partnerships should have a lot of truth, and partnerships should have a lot of questions, more than 20. We run through more than 20 of the questions you should ask yourself and any potential partner that you want to work with. Do not miss this episode on partnerships on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing.
This is the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, but don't let the name fool you. We're not here to be negative. We're here to be real, to pull back the curtain and show you what's behind those highlight reels. I'm Kristi Candle, a developer, investor, and someone who's made a career out of turning hard lessons into practical tools and helping others become developers in their own communities. Along with my co-host, Erik Stenbakken, we're bringing you unfiltered stories behind the deals, the ones you don't see on social media, the blown budgets, the nightmare tenants, the surprise wins, and the wisdom that comes from actually living it. Because real estate isn't all about private jets and passive income. Sometimes it's evictions and 3 a.m. plumbing disasters, and we're here for all of it.
Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. If you're new around here, we're actually not pessimists. That's the name of the podcast, but we call it that because we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. And sometimes that truth isn't always sunshine. Yes, granted, clouds and rain don't sell as many sponsorships and as many join my course, mastermind, etc. But you know what? It's part of the walk. And so Kristi and I are going to talk about what really happens in real estate investing. As I said, my name is Erik Stenbakken, and I have been an investor since 2010. Single family homes and vacation rentals is what I really lean into now. I've wrote the STR in an hour course, so you can take your start from A to Z in vacation rentals in 59 minutes or less. Now we've got Kristi Candle here as my co-host. Kristi, welcome.
I'm Kristi Candle. I'm a real estate developer, investor, and I teach locals how to become real estate developers in their own backyard. And today I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that comes up all the time within the investing community and the business world. It's partnerships. It's how do I pick my partner? It's how do I form it? And I mean, this podcast itself is a partnership. Granted, it has lower stakes. We're not raking in the money, but this is incredibly fun. And even before we did this, we actually sat down and we said, what are our goals? Why do we want to do this? To see where we aligned in the first place. And even though we know it's a lower stakes game, we understand the value and the importance of setting up partnerships properly. To that extent, Erik, have you ever had a partnership go south?
Yes. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that this is everywhere. I have been in partnerships forever. My first partnership was probably my dad and his lawnmower. And the deal he made with letting me use it to mow lawns to make money. In college, I had a partnership. We did landscaping. And by that, I mean taking out trees, putting in trees, shrubs, that kind of stuff. And it was a little clunky how that one ended. I moved across the globe. So that kind of necessitated an end to that partnership. It wasn't because things went bad. It's because that phase ended, right? And from that, I learned a number of things about partnerships that I try to incorporate lessons from every partnership I've been in. And yeah, I have had one go. It was I didn't want it to end the way that it did, but it did. In my past life, I've done commercial photography and video for many years. And I had a partnership which was formed, and we'll get to this, is why did it form? It's because I felt like I needed that extra help, right? I needed the yin yang kind of a thing, right? And that's usually why partnerships start, is it's like, I'm good at this part, you're good at that part, or I have this and you have that. And together we can make a better thing. And that partnership that I had was a video production partnership, and it ran for probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years, kind of depending, because it was a little bit informal at the beginning. And then it's like, okay, we're going to actually form a company. How do we do this? And it ended up ending not the way I wanted it to, but it ended in such a way, because we built it in such a way, that we're still friends. When my former partner comes to town, we can still go out and get a coffee and hang out. And I still rent or loan him equipment if he's here needing that. Now, we're not partners anymore, but we are still friends. We're still social. We can still get along. And that's because we built the partnership with that in mind. We'll get more into that a little bit later.
A lot of people struggle with, don't get into partnerships with family and friends. And I used to believe that completely because they're like, when it goes south, then you're not going to talk to them anymore. But I actually disagree with that. And
Right.
I only get
So
into
do I.
business and partnerships with family and friends because if I'm going to create something new to put out into the world, I want to bring my family and friends along with me.
That's right.
And that's what we're going to go through today is how do you do that properly? And it honestly, it comes down to communication and it comes around to preparation. And that's what we're going to get into today.
That's right. Why would you go into the most fun things? It's like, when you go on vacation, never go with someone you like. What? What? Why would you do that? That's a terrible idea. Of course you want to go with someone you like. But also, if you're going on vacation with somebody that you like, you need to go with someone who's got those same values. See? I was sharing with somebody, it's like, hey, wouldn't this be fun as a community of investors if we could do a cruise? Like we could get together and immediately someone's like, nope, don't do boats. I was like, okay, well then that's not going to work. And that happened simply because of the communication, right? So, Kristi, why do people rush into partnerships, do you think?
I think a lot of people get an idea and they're sitting around, whether they're having coffee, having a few drinks, just interacting, going, oh, it'd be great if we started a company. Cool. Let's do it together. And then without actually thinking through roles and responsibilities, who's bringing what to the table, you go, I like you, you like me. Let's be friends. Let's start a business. Yay. That is the worst way to do it.
Right. I mean, you want to like the people that you work with. That I think is an important thing. But you do need to have better reasons than just one, I like you, or B, and this is probably even more dangerous. It's like, I'm too scared to do this on my own. I don't think I have the capacity. And so I'm going to let you carry me through this partnership and what we do. That's bad. That is bad because you lose agency. You're willing to take suggestions that you should not take if you were willing to be responsible for this. It's interesting. I went on a motorcycle tour across Colorado Back Road Discovery Trail. And the person who was leading the group, at least I thought he was leading, said, I'm not your leader. And this is important. He said, we are doing an individual group ride together. Every person on this ride is responsible for themselves. And I thought, okay, that's different. Now, he was smart enough to communicate that up front because the assumption would have been, well, you're in charge. I'm just going to follow you. Well, it turns out following him was not always the best idea. You had to have your own map, right? Now, in a partnership where you form something, let's suppose this is a legal thing and there is money on the line, there are some steps that you should do before you get going on that. Before we even get into that, I want to propose that you follow in your mind this structure. So I used to be an English teacher and a creative writing person. That was a couple careers ago. But every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you think about partnerships as having those same ingredients, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and every partnership has all three of those. Do not think that your partnership only has the beginning and the middle, and that it will never end. That's terrible. And if you think about, no, we're just going to jump into the middle. And then guess what? The end is coming faster than you think, right? So by knowing that every partnership has a beginning, a middle, and an end, you can plan a good partnership that works well. So
Oh, wait, Eric, what if somebody says, but no, this is going to last forever? And well, I see an example, like my parents are in business together and they did it their whole lives and they stayed married. But what if they say, I'm going to be that anomaly? What would you say to that?
That's a great example. Unless your parents are older than Methuselah and have somehow achieved immortality, this is the sad truth, is that my grandparents were married more than 70 years. What an incredible partnership. And then my grandma passed, and that partnership was over. And then my grandfather passed. You know what? Even the best, really long-lived type things will eventually come to an end. And in that sphere, that's why you have estate planning. That's why you have a will and trust, or however you approach that with your professionals. I'm not a lawyer. Is you should do that, right? Because every partnership will end, even long-lasting ones, right? And even if the partnership continues, they almost always evolve. They change, roles shift, goals shift. And that's a good one. Roles shift, goals shift. That sounded pretty good.
And life happens. So like you're getting together because right now your lives sync up, you're in line, you hit all the right stuff, but you're going to get married or divorced. You're going to have kids. You're going to move. Work's going to change. You're going to retire. Life is going to life. And that is why it is so important to set up partnerships properly and to be realistic about the fact that everything has an ending.
Right. So I've got a bunch of questions here. But before we dive into asking those questions, because that'd be a great thing to plug into a transcript if you're listening to this and have AI summarize it for you, I'm going to fly through some of these, is before you get started in a partnership, I have one rule for me. And Kristi, I want you to think about one rule for you that's really important. For me, it is honesty. Absolute, total, straight up honesty. Now, this may be some awkward conversations. There may be some hard conversations to get going, and they may require some vulnerability on your part and your partner's part. But that is absolutely essential for me. If you don't have that, then it's a no-go. Just no way, because you don't know what you don't know. See? And that is absolutely can be a disaster. Saw a video the other day of a guy, they were hiking in a glacier, and there was a little stream of water going by, and this couldn't have been more than 2 feet wide, right? And so looks like you could step in and get your boot wet, except he leaned over, took his ice axe and plummeted all the way down to his shoulder, couldn't touch the bottom. This thing was probably, who knows, it was deeper than 5 feet deep and only 2 feet wide. Well, dishonesty is like that too, right? If you can't see where you're going, any little part of this thing could end up totally dunking you. You thought, oh, I'll just get my shoes wet here. Nope, you're up past your helmet, bloop, just like that. So for me, rule number one is honesty, because that leans into communication.
Which is mine, I would kind of merge two words and say authentic communication. For me, you have to be able to have the hard conversations, the deep conversations, the real. The minute you stop talking about the elephant in the room is the minute your partnership just went south. So to your honesty one, Erik, how do you go about gauging and evaluating that characteristic in someone else that you might potentially be working with?
I think some of it is approaching a partnership like a dating relationship or getting into a serious relationship. This just takes time. Like, it just does. Now, the older you get and the more experienced you get, the faster you can read those things, right? I mean, this reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. It's the ability to assess a situation in a very short amount of time, sometimes in a blink. But it's not actually done in a blink. See, it's done over decades, is because when we formed this partnership, if you didn't know this as a listener, Kristi and I have never met in person, but we're good friends. But how that happened is we both ended up in the same tribe together. We both ended up volunteering our time to help and mentor others, independent of each other. We were both very involved in various parts of the tribe together. We both felt like, hey, we were always just like maybe a quarter step out from the band, They were all kind of, and we were like, I'm with you, but not exactly like spot on with you. And all of these things are things that someone with experience can look at and say, that means that, that means that, that means that, that means that. And they tell a bigger story, but they tell it faster than just straight up time goes. Now, if you're younger, more inexperienced, let me be very clear about this. You should take that time. There is no substitute for that. And so maybe what you need to do is you need to go in for some low stakes partnerships. Hey, instead of doing this big partnership, let's buy a little vending machine route together. Let's put in $20,000, $10,000 per person, and we'll trade off roles with this. Well, guess what? If it goes bad, you've only got some vending machines on the line, and you can sell those and get out of it, and you get experience. But if you're into that kind of a relationship and you find out that they said, oh yeah, I'm going to go out on Tuesday and get those all filled up again. And then on Friday, you get a call from the store where you have it. And they're like, hey, your machine's empty, and people are banging on it. And so they're like, hey, I thought you said you were going to go fill those on Tuesday. Oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't. I was going to, but I didn't. Okay, yeah, all right. So then you're like, okay, wait a minute. So what happens if we have a big multifamily and we're into this for millions of dollars? Okay, so that's not maybe the best example, but taking low stakes steps and watching for the cues. Should you be judgy? Yeah, you should be judgy here. Really evaluate these things. And to Kristi's, to your point, communicate authentically. If you say, hey, I thought you were going to take a look at such and such on Tuesday, or I thought you were going to get back to me. And if they say, yeah, you know what, I was, but I crashed my scooter. And so that day ended up being horrible. And I didn't, whatever things happen. Okay. Life happens and they have real things. And if you have no grace for anyone, well, then I don't want to partner with you. Right. But if everything is excuse after excuse after excuse, guess what? When the numbers get bigger, their performance doesn't improve.
And that's
Right?
where you really need to lean into your support network as well, to where
Yeah.
you gotta, as you're building up your spidey senses and your intuition, you should listen to those around you. Don't take it like full, because there are going to be so many people who say, don't start a business, don't get into whatever because it's risky. So there's going to be that, but also understand that if you have core people around you that you trust and love, and they're saying, I don't know about that person.
That's right.
Take that to heart. That means something. And I agree with the baby steps.
I'm going to underline that twice, Kristi. Their friends are their tribe and their people. And if you look at their friends, you're like, man, I wouldn't hang out with those people. Oh, but that person in the middle that I met, they must be different. You are kidding yourself. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why Kristi and I connected, is because we're in a group of people who had a lot of shared, objectives and goals and desires. And it's like, it wasn't for everyone. Right. And the fact that we were both there said a lot to me about Kristi, and that she was actually doing the things, not just talking about the things. But anyways, take the advice, take the, they say that you are the sum of the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most, right? Hello, that's a fabulous averaging tool for a potential partner. Because if they're hanging around with people who are like, oh yeah, my buddy here, man, he just got out of prison for drug trafficking. And my other friend over here is like, well, he would come over, but he lost his license because, he was going 60 over in a neighborhood. You're like, who are you hanging around with here? And so, yes. And if their friends, your friends, it's both. So you look at their friends and you ask your friends, hey, what do you think? What do you see here? Trust your friends. I've seen this go. Yeah, that's just such a good point, Kristi, because I've seen it in relationships where people are like, all their friends say, don't do it. And like, oh no, but I see something in them that you don't see. It's like, probably not.
Yep.
I am co-host of this podcast because education is my calling. That's also why I developed a course on short-term rentals. It's called STR in an Hour, and it's perfect for busy professionals. It's a lot of content packed into 1 hour. No fluff, no upsell. It's an overview of STRs from A to Z. Everything from how to choose a property to how to estimate income and expenses. It's literally the best and most content I could pack into 59 minutes. With over 4,000 nightly stays in my own STRs, I've learned important lessons, and I want to share them with you. Link with more information in the show notes.
All right, so what are some of the other questions or things that you would propose that someone asks when they go, okay, I'm new to partnerships. I'm going to listen to people around me. I'm going to observe who the friends are and the people that the person I want to partner with are hanging around. What else should they be looking for and asking?
I've got a list of these because I think it's one of the most, because really, look, I think that getting a partnership going and making a partnership work is just like getting a good lease. Your homework up front is where the work is. I haven't invested in syndications, but I've read the books about it. And that's where your homework is. It's you're doing the work up front. And it's the work that you do. You think it's like, well, this is just the pre-work. And then the real work comes later. No. The real work is before you get into that partnership. And then I won't say you put it on cruise control, but that's not a million miles away, because you do what you're going to do once you're in the partnership, and you keep doing that thing. Yeah, you check on stuff. We'll get to that later in the middle part, right? But the bulk of the success or failure of your partnership happens before the partnership ever happens.
100%.
So, here are some questions, and this is the part where you could just load this into transcript software and seriously put these on flashcards. Go out to dinner over a series of nights, go for coffee, whatever it takes, get on Zoom calls, ask these questions, be authentic as you answer these. You're going to have to do some soul searching yourself. That's important. You go asking the other people this, fine and dandy, but you should have these questions. You should ask these to yourself. So here it goes. What are your core goals? What are your secondary goals? What would winning look like for you in this partnership? What are your fears? your triggers. What role do you want to play? Like, what's your lane? What role do you not want to ever play? Are you a spender or a saver? Where would you want to spend or not spend? Like, there's a story behind every single one of these things. We got offered a partnership in a vacation rental before we were into vacation rentals. And they said, we want to get into this because we've got one of 4 partners and this house needs some repairs. And yes, it did, because we had rented it. And it was a cool cabin, log cabin. It's amazing. But one of the partners was just like, nope, not going to spend any money on this. I put my money in at the beginning and not going to spend any more. Well, the other 3 were basically held hostage by this one who didn't want to do anything, upgrade, fix, and repair this property. So every one of these things has any comments on those, Kristi, before we rip into the next
I would
ones?
say what role do you not want to play and what's your lane is one of the most important. The very first partnership that I got into, we bought a vacation rental together, but we were very clear that he wants nothing to do with managing the construction. And as far as the operations go, if he needs to do some guest interaction or manage with the cleaners, he will, but it's not a preference. To where it was, okay, cool. So you're going to handle the upfront lender, insurance, entity formation. I'm going to handle the whole rehab and deal with contractors and material. And then we'll split the operational duties. So he would make sure all the bills got paid and we would split how we worked with the guests and the cleaners and whatnot. And then at the same time, then another partnership, it was literally the reverse. And because I had learned so much from his side of things and she was stronger in the decor and construction, then it flipped and I did his role and she did what I had done. And it was very awesome and very clear because nothing happens perfectly. I mean, I'm still dealing with one of those that is like but knowing who's on first or what is such a key role. Like one property, we had a permit issue come up and both my partners were like, thank goodness you understand cities and permits and how to navigate this because this is a foreign language. And so I know anything permit wise that comes across, that's in my lane. And it's very nice because they're there to support, but they're like, I'm not sure how. And I'm like, you guys are fine. Like when we switch over to this, like this will be off my plate and back on yours and we'll be back at it.
Yeah. And so a fun way to do that is if you took all of the jobs that if you're not aware of all the work that's involved in a partnership, or at least let's just say 80%, right? You shouldn't be doing it. You should have some good idea of what this work is going to take to get done.
And if you don't, technology hack, put it into perplexity.ai, ChatGPT, any of them and say, I'm going to start XYZ business. What are all the job positions, roles, and responsibilities? And you just have that full brainstorming session until you get to the end and you have a dialed in list and you put someone's name next to each one. That right there is going to tell you what percentage of equity, sweat, like you're going to see very clearly, are we a fit or not?
That's right. And if you take that list and you take a highlighter, and Kristi's the bright yellow and mine's the green one, and we highlight it and it turns out it's 90% yellow, we got a problem here, right? We need to address this. So yeah, that's a really important part of a partnership is spelling out what is going to happen. So here's some more. What would make you want to leave the partnership, right? Because sometimes it's those little triggers that you wouldn't really think about. But if you thought about yourself and you ask them and you're both honest about that, like, oh yeah, that would spell the end. And it's like, oh, okay, let's be careful not to let that happen. But then if you know that, you don't accidentally ask your partner, it's like, oh, hey, I'd like you to handle all the technology part of it. And they're just like, that's it, I'm out, I'm done. And you're like, what? I didn't know that was a trigger for you. So ask those questions. So here's more. What's your time horizon? And what would you want to happen at that point? Okay, so just a pro tip here.
Huge.
You cannot be too specific. There's no such thing as being too specific. You can say, by the year 2030, I want X number of dollars and I want them in this way. And I want to, like, you can't be too specific. So time horizon and what do you want to have happen at that point? What's your best and worst case scenario? Ask them, if we hit 95th percentile in this, what would that look like? If we hit the 5th percentile, what would that look like? And what would you want to do? And then assign a percentage of likelihood that they think and that you think that's going to happen. Because if I think I'm going to hit the 95th percentile, I'm like, I'm 100% sure I'm going to be in the 95th percentile. And you're like, I'm 100% sure we're going to be in the 10th percentile. That's like, okay, we got some misalignment here with our optimism. So the more questions you ask, it's kind of like these conversation starter cards that you could actually do this. Here's some more. I hate to say this, but I'm going to say this. If you're putting enough money on the line, do a background check and a credit check on each other and share it. Yeah. Yep. You're going to have to do that.
Oh, but I trust him, Erik. Erik, I trust my partner. I trust him.
I know. Because we want to, right? We want to believe the best about the people that we like, right? We really do. And we don't want to find out that there's something wrong, because that's actually disconfirming, right? We don't want to find out anything that says, actually, they're not as great as you think. Now, had I done that before I signed up with a builder, I would not have the episode that we have, How to Lose $500,000 on One Door, because I didn't do that. I had somebody later go back, because, by the way, a builder is your partner. Okay, just in case you didn't know that, they're your partner. I said, hey, would you look into this person? Well, it turns out they had 1 federal and I think 7 state lawsuits pending against them at that point. Like, had I known that, would I? No, I would not have partnered with them. So disclose any past litigation. What long-term, okay, this is more of like a job interview thing. The more I thought about this in preparation for this podcast, because we do plan for these podcasts, I thought, this sounds a lot like interviewing for an employee. And it is. You're interviewing not an employee, you're interviewing a partner. And so you really want to get into this. So here's one. What long-term, I always ask this of all of my employees that I work with, what long-term commitments have you started and seen all the way through completion?
That is one of the biggest ones, because shiny object syndrome is real, and there will be people who are excellent quick starts. They get off and they've started all these things and their follow through is horrendous. So seeing what people can take start to finish and how they get there and how long that lasts. And another question to kind of go with that is, what other partnerships have you had? How did they end? Yep. How long did they last?
Super excellent question. To put it into the relationship context, it's like, oh, we're starting to date. Oh, I think she's really pretty nice. It's like, and my friend goes, she's been married 9 times, right? I'm like, but the 10th time's going to be a charm. That'll be me. Friends, this is not dating advice either, but no, don't do that.
When someone shows you who they are, that is who they are, and you have to believe it, no matter how much we want to be optimistic and think that this is different. Believe what you see.
Yeah. Yep. Another good question. What's your financial backstop, and how ready are you to use it if things get tough? It's like, well, I've got a 401k, but I'm not touching it. Period. Hands off. That's not happening. Well, then that's okay. But you just need to know that. It's like, all right, we'll structure things with it. Okay, another one.
But Erik, the money questions are awkward. Why would I ever ask?
Yeah.
How do I ask my partner this? That just seems scary. Like, we're going in this together. They'll figure it out, right?
No, you bring up a really good question. And this is, I think, a question that precedes all questions, is to say, we are considering a serious partnership here. I'm taking it seriously. I want this to succeed. In order for this to succeed, we have to have frank conversations about what we're about to do. You really do need to do this, because the way that marketing psychology works is that most people make their decisions emotionally. And I worked in marketing for years as a commercial photographer. My job was to make things look awesome. And a lot of that awesome wasn't just to show what the thing looked like. It was to show what the thing felt like, right? Like an experience. I want to feel like this. So people make their decisions emotionally, and then they rationalize them by looking at numbers that are convenient and match the conclusion they've already made emotional. What we're saying here is you have to know that's a fact about humans. It's all of us. And then step back and say, okay, what is the actual information here? And will I believe the information, or will I just go with my heart? And it might work if you go with your heart. But if all of the numbers are saying otherwise, unfortunately, I'm going to take the odds against you, right? And so what we're doing here in this podcast is we're trying to help put the odds in your favor. So you have to say, hey, we're going to have some really frank and honest conversations here, because if we want this to succeed, this is what is required. So you begin with that. When it comes
to financial, that's a huge conversation to have. And that goes back to the authentic conversation, the honesty. Yeah. And that's saying, yes, we want to buy this together. we want, this is our budget, this is how much capital I have. And I will flat out ask, like, what is your runway? And I've had partnerships where we all were about at the same. I've had some where this was getting someone pretty close to being tapped out, but I had ample extra reserves. And so we said, if we need to go into this, here's what those terms would look like.
That's right.
Whether it was cash flow, equity, or how that went. And we coming up with a full game plan, and also knowing in some of those partnerships that maybe instead of paying for a huge expense out of pocket, maybe if the other person takes the initiative, maybe they get a 0% credit card for 12 months. And that's the way up for our business entity. And that's the way that we'll float this random 10, 20, whatever $1,000 expense across to help them out. So having all sorts of scenarios and methods for how you can have those reserves and what happens when and if you need to tap into it is a huge conversation to have, because as much as we would like everything to go perfectly, it never does. It never does. And it also rarely goes as bad as it should be. And we will talk more about that in the next episode as well. But it's just being realistic with yourself, with your people, with what's available, because there's nothing that gives you gray hair and wrinkles more than something coming up and you not already having a strategy for how you're going to address it.
Right. Yes. So, asking those disconfirming questions. Another one's like, what will you not do? Because if your partner says, well, I'm never leaving New York City, I'm just not. Well, then your talk about doing a live-in flip in Georgia that's just not a thing. So asking, just being straight up and say, what will you do? What do you want to do? Because that's what we all want to do. Like, I want to do this. I want to do this. My wife had a conversation with one of my son's high school buddies, and she's like, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I really want to work about 2 days a week, in a career. And like, well, don't we all? Right. But finding that out, okay, early on is like, okay, well, what kind of partnership is that going to be? Well, it doesn't mean it won't work. It just means you have a different kind of partnership with that person. So to cap up this beginning, middle, end, this is the beginning, asking a lot of questions, right? Is ambiguity is the enemy of alignment. And things are hard enough to be successful when you're all going in the same direction, right? But as soon as you have misalignment, think about, a rope pull at a picnic. You're doing a tug of war, and half you people on your rope are pulling sideways or pulling the opposite direction. Like, you can't do that. You cannot do that. So you all have to be aligned, and ambiguity is the enemy of that.
Love, love, love that. And there are so many times that I will hear an employee, a partner, a client say, well, it's not spelled out there, so we're probably okay. Red, red, red flag. The minute I hear that, I see that, I go, oh, no. This is something we are going to drill down on, and we are going to get black and white. So if this comes up in 2 months and 6 months and a year, we know exactly how this is going to go down and how this is addressed. This is not a surprise waiting to pop out later. We don't like surprises. We want everything to be clear. If you see ambiguity in something, do not assume it will work out. Figure that out as soon as you find it.
Yeah. And so,
are you an aspiring real estate developer who wants to get in the game but feels overwhelmed by where to start? What if I personally mentored you, giving you the exact guidance and strategies to complete your first development project without making costly mistakes or needing millions in the bank? Would you take me up on that offer? I'm Kristi Candle, and I've developed over $450 million in projects across the country. After nearly 20 years in development, I created this mentorship to give you the exact guidance and support I wish I had when I started. Are you next?
So let's move on to the middle. So what happens in the middle to keep a partnership? Suppose you start a partnership. It's going well. It's like, this is going pretty well. And this is actually a lot shorter section than the beginning, because as we said, the work is up front in these things. Kristi, what are some things that keep a partnership working well?
Along with the honesty and authentic communication, there's the paperwork that goes along with that. So for every partnership that we have, we'll have the legal entity that's formed that spells out what the ownership percentages are. We will have what's called an operating agreement. And what that does is within that tells us how we are going to operate this business, this property, however it is. Inside of that will be the roles and responsibilities of the people involved. And it will we detail out to the nth degree who is doing which part of the project, because whether you're acquiring it, remodeling it, stabilizing it, operating it, there's all sorts of roles that happen in there. We even go to an extra level that says, if and when life happens and we need to change up these roles and responsibilities, here's how we'll shift this agreement to say, we're still partners, but maybe the cash flow changes. Maybe the equity changes if it's a more permanent solution. But we allow for things to change and evolve because that's life, and it will. So we'll have those. And then we also figure out, so for us, we found that it's best to work within a CRM. So we have our project management software that we all can talk and communicate in. For the people who aren't living in that every day, for some of the partners, it will ping them in an email and it'll pull them in to go to that so they can see, oh, here's specifically, we're evicting a tenant in this area. They know what's going on. They know we're going to spend $1,500 to get the unit ready once it's done. And that way it's all one central database. And then we also have shared Google Drive folders that has everything in it, and they're organized the same way for every single entity that we have. So that way whoever's working on it knows what's going to happen. Those are some of the ones that we have. How do you structure your partnerships, and then how you guys operate?
Well, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I actually had a little YouTube channel briefly, did everyone, right? It was called Erik Learns the Hard Way. That was the name of my YouTube channel, because it seems that so many things that I've learned the hard way. A lot of the things that I shared with you are questions I didn't ask when I started that video production partnership. And fortunately, we did begin with the end in mind, and we were able to exit gracefully. Some of the things that didn't happen is we didn't talk about the roles, and we didn't talk about the responsibilities, and we didn't highlight things. And as things went along through this middle phase, I realized, wait a minute, I'm doing 100% of the sales and marketing, shouldering all that cost, all that time, leveraging all of my contacts that I built up over a 10, 15-year period. And we were splitting the production, and then we were splitting all the income. It's like, wait a minute. We're splitting the shoot and edit of the video work, and then we're splitting the income 50-50, but I'm doing all of the sales and marketing up front. And I realized this just was not a priority to my partner. He had never really done that before, and he didn't know how it worked, didn't know it was work, didn't know it cost a lot of money. And I became increasingly dissatisfied with that. And it essentially dissolved the partnership, because here is the actual metaphor of what happened. He was upset with me because I was not coming down to Denver, and I live an hour north of Denver, to Denver enough to help do video for a video on third wave coffee. He wanted to do a mini documentary on third wave coffee. I'm like, who's the client? Who's paying for this? Nah, we're just going to shoot. It's going to be fun. Like, okay, yeah, there's some cool images and coffee's nice and everything, but what's the point of this? Meanwhile, I'm trying to do a pitch for a $50,000 production, and he's not. I wrote a 5-page proposal trying to outline, like, all by myself, right? I wrote the whole proposal, like, this is what I want to do. This is how I think the budget breaks down. This is all the other stuff that happens with this. Like, man, if we're going to do this together, I want your input on it. So I sent him a 5-page proposal, and I got a text back that said, looks good.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
And I realized we were not in alignment here. Okay. And this isn't faulting somebody, really. It's just, this is as much or more my fault, because I didn't pursue this at the beginning. Like, what do you want? Well, he wanted to make videos, and he makes good videos. He did make good videos. He tells good stories. He's really good at that. I wanted to make videos that made money. See, he didn't want to make videos, period. That's it. That's what he wanted to do. And he's good at it. But I wanted to make media that made money, because I'm doing this like as my livelihood. Now, I'm not saying he had no interest in that whatsoever. I'm exaggerating maybe just a tiny bit, not much, for sake of clarity here. We had different goals, right? And when I realized, whoa, we are not in alignment. We did not have an operating agreement. Now, we had a partnership agreement, but it didn't spell out our jobs. It didn't split out our responsibilities. It didn't, and that would have told me a lot had I done that. So I've taken a lot of those lessons because, hey, like you heard, Erik learns the hard way. And in the partnership that I have with my wife in our investing, one of the things that we do, and this goes to your point with the operating agreements and putting things into the CRM, is we do monthly checkups. Every month on the 1st or the next day adjacent to that, we get together and list. I have a full page of questions that we go through for each one of the entities and LLCs. We ask all of these questions so that we get on the same page. We're like, oh, I didn't notice that had gone that far off track. Oh, you didn't either. Okay, wow. All right, let's look at this. So one of those things is the regular rhythm of communication that is required to keep these things on track. You mentioned putting the things in the CRM there. Did you have a regular check-in period where it's like, all right, everybody post your news, everybody check in on your news? How'd that work?
Until an entity or a business is stabilized, we will have constant communication. Normally it's a group text, just unless it's something meatier that needs actual documentation. But yes, as we're acquiring, as we're stabilizing, as we're remodeling, as we're just even getting a new business set up and going, we're in constant communication. Once it shifts over to, hey, this is stabilized, then it does. Like you said, all the heavy lifting is done at that point, and now you just have your check-ins. So what we have is we set a threshold. Say it's a property, we set a threshold and we say that property needs to have a bank account balance of $20,000 in it. That covers our CapEx, that gives us our buffer based on that property and what could go wrong. After that, then every $5,000, every time we get an extra $15,000 in there, we each take $5,000. And so it's set up to where we go, oh, okay, here's how this one's going to operate. And then once a year, we'll have a check-in meeting. So most of our assets we hold long-term. And it's, hey, this is a, let's say it's 30 years. And we have different ages of partnerships. I mean, there's a 20-year gap in some of them to where we have different endings. But at the same time, we all said, yeah, this is a longer hold. And then the person who was older, he can go longer. But every year we'll do that check and we'll say, where's the market at? How is this asset performing? Is it doing what we thought it would? Do we want to consider doing something else? And one of our groups, one partner did want out, and we were willing to get rid of a smaller single family home and said, okay, we'll list that. And when that goes, we will then buy you out of the other one. Well, we tried. The economy changed. It became a buyer's market, and it got to a point where we'd have to drop the price lower than the threshold that we all set together. And we said, okay, we're pulling it off the market. We're getting a long-term tenant in. We'll evaluate the market next year and see if we can get you out. But that way, the partner who wanted out saw that we were acting fair and we were trying to make it happen. But we all knew we had a baseline, and we said, we're not going below that because we're not going to take away all the effort that we put in prior years. So those are some of the things that we'll do.
So here's what I want to highlight from what you just said, which is all valuable. But you said thresholds, if-thens. This is so important, so important, so important. You need to have those for all different parts of this relationship. Because let's suppose it's a real estate investing partnership and you're buying a vacation rental in said market. Well, you see, remember, if you followed these steps, you shared your goals. What does winning look like for you? Goalposts, right? The reason that when you go to a football game or you watch it on TV, they don't just run out of the stadium like Forrest Gump, is because they have the end. Like, this is where it ends. Once you get to this point, you can spike the ball. I don't know, is that legal anymore? You can have your celebration, whatever you do, right? And you're like, this is where, when we cross this threshold, then this. We cross the threshold, then we get the points. Or in this way is, then we sell, or then we reinvest, or then we take a cash draw. Whatever that is, you need to have those metrics very clear at the beginning. When our NOI reaches this, or when the market cap reaches this, or when appreciation reaches this, then we do this. Then we say, do you want in? We're going to sell. And if you don't want to sell, you can be the one that buys. Here's how we do this. I had a little thing where the stakes were very small, and I learned this. It was on about a $2,000 slide scanner. This is back, oh man, this is going to date me here, over 20 years ago, back when I shot film. And I wanted to buy a slide scanner. Maybe it was $3,000. It was a lot, right? And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to spend that much on that, because photographers are poor. Have mercy on them if you hire them. And so I went in with a friend, and we were going to buy this thing together. So we had a partnership. And I said, Mike, I think we need to make a partnership agreement on this. Like, oh, that's ridiculous. I don't want to do, like, hey, it's $3,000. We got to do this. Now, it was a one-page thing, and I drafted it up, and I'm not a lawyer, but I put it together. And if two people agree on the thing and both people sign it, you got a deal, right? So we put this together, and I said, if one person wants out and the other person does not want to buy the other person out based on a rate, and I had set it up as the sold average of the same product over a 30-day period Like suppose you bought it for 3,000 and I knew how technology works, that you go to sell it 2 years later and the thing is worth $500. It's like, okay, so we'll take the $500 that the thing is worth. If I don't want to buy, I'll buy you out at $250. That's what it is. And if you don't want to take $250 and I don't want to pay you more than that, then we just sell it and we split whatever we get. That's what we do. And that's what we did. And that's exactly what happened, is that he said, or I said, I don't even remember who it was done first. We're like, yeah, I'm out of this. I don't want it anymore. And the other person's like, well, I still want to use it. It's like, well, then if you still want to use it, here's the process that we use for you to buy it. Like, well, I don't want to pay that much for it. It's like, well, then, okay, see, this is really important. It's like a flow chart. If yes, then this happens. If no, then this happens. You think about this. And we ended up where one of us is like, I don't want to do it that way. It's like, but this is what we agreed on. And we just followed the plan.
It's really hard to push back on when you see the signatures there, you can try and push back and see if there's flexibility, but most of the time it's here, and it stops the argument and it allows you to roll into, hey, if this is going to end, at least this was written while we were still friends, while we agreed. So the feelings of bitterness, the feelings of, I got treated unfairly. Did you? If it's literally written right here and you agreed to it, maybe that'll just help you decide how you want to have these agreements in the future. But it helps clear up the muddy waters at that point.
And the key here is that you're doing it while there's no anger, there's no frustration, there's no fight or flight, there's no resentment. You're just like, I think that would be fair. And everybody looks at that with a cool head when feelings are good, and you be honest about it, express your discomfort if you have any discomfort with it. And then once you're like, yep, that would be a good way to end this. Then when it happens and there's always some friction with that, then you just go back to the agreement and say, well, this is how we're going to terminate this. And that's what I did with the video partnership. And it ended up pretty good because it's like, this is how we do it. This is how we dispose of the assets. This is how we shift the name, the LLC, the website, all those things. These are our options. See, and we gave ourselves options and we exercised those options. And I think it ended up pretty well for people who were not aligned. So that brings us to the last part. What happens when it ends? And really, this section is pretty short, because if you did the part up front and you got in alignment and you had a workflow and you had your if-then clauses and you had your end zone, defined, then when you cross it, you just play the plan. Really, that is what you do.
Yeah, we had a brokerage that we were about to launch in Ohio, and we had a partner who would be the operating partner. We would bring in all the business expertise and everything that could be managed remotely, and we set it up to where we were defining it all. Different licenses and certifications were in progress and going. We said who would pay what costs for the startup costs, how it would be broken out later. And we didn't form the entity yet because we wanted to make sure we got it up to the point of having all the licenses, all the certs, everything needed to operate. And to me as well, I'm constantly vetting whether someone is a potential employee, a partner, a client, a something. I'm always looking at them and what's happening and being cognizant of what's happening in their life. Because when people start to pull away or start to not meet the expectations that they said they could fulfill, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that maybe what they thought they were good to do and what they thought they wanted to sign up for no longer aligns. And so then by giving them the out to say, hey, if things changed, if you're not quite ready to make this leap yet, that's totally fine. Here's how we end it. It's right here. It's spelled here.
Right.
Here's how we end it. And gracefully giving them the ability to exit or go, no, I'm doubling down. I'm all in.
That's right.
And that helps with these. And to this day, the person that we didn't start the brokerage with, we still do tons of business with in other capacities and still talk and text all the time.
This is a matter, and this is really important too, is that it's just not the right person at the right time. And that's okay. And you need to know that it's like, you're not saying that person is a bad person if you don't partner with them on this other deal. You're not evaluating their character. You're not saying, it's just like, actually, or maybe it's me. It's like, I thought I wanted that, but I don't. And this goes back to the ability to say, you know what? I think I changed my mind based on some new information, based on a more honest assessment of myself. I don't think this is a good fit for me. And you have to give yourself that permission. But I tell you what, just that goes with everything you do, everything. It's like, you know what? I used to eat a ton of red meat and now I don't think that's my thing. Or, you know what? I used to eat only plants and now, you know what? I think I might have an egg once in a while. Whatever it is, our society has gotten so bad at saying you can never change your mind. You're wishy-washy. Well, you're a flip-flop. You've got all these other things as if that's a horrible thing. Basically, what we're saying when we say that is like, you can never grow. You can never change your mind. It's like, that's terrible, right? So look at yourself and say, is this what I really want? And then this is the flip side, is that once you've made that commitment, stick with your commitment, right? Go with that. As this unpacks, and there's 1,000 different ways things can go sideways, unforeseen things. And this is why it's very important to have a plan before you get into it, is if you're going to be into an asset or a partnership where there's a lot on the line, do it with legal paperwork, right? We're not lawyers. I drew up a little contract for a slide scanner once upon a time. I wouldn't do that for a house, right? I wouldn't do that for buying an asset or buying a business. Is have a lawyer that's qualified in that scope of law to put together an agreement to avoid the problems, to avoid the heartaches, to avoid the difficulty, because then you're following a flow chart. Everybody can keep their temperatures down and it's like, okay, that didn't end maybe the way I wanted it to, but there was a lot less blood and a lot less stress about it. And we play the plan. And I think that's the best way to let it unfold. I jotted down as I was planning this podcast, one of the things that really kind of got to me was like, don't sacrifice project success on the altar of your ego. Because sometimes you're like, I'm just not going to back down. I'm not going to change. I will not say I was wrong. I will not call that other person out. Whatever the thing is that your ego is telling you, is if that's going to cause the crash and burn of the experiment, the work, the project, the partnership, don't. Take a good look at yourself and say, you know what, that's my ego talking here. And let's take it a couple steps back and maybe get some mediation, some conflict resolution, so on. Again, I'm not a mediator, but they exist.
So what are we dropped a ton of great advice and lessons learned in this. What would be some closing thoughts that you just want people to walk away with to go? Because I strongly believe in partnerships and I don't want to start another solo business. But what are maybe some closing truths that you could share with the audience?
I believe it's alignment, coming into alignment with your partner. And that only happens through really thorough communication, written, spoken, looking at their past, looking at what they want to do for the future. And I think that takes some honest reflection for yourself. What do I really want? Do I really want the money, or do I just want to look like I have the money? Do I want the free time, or do I want the door count, right? And just whatever that is being really clear with what I want and what the partner wants and saying, does that align? And if it doesn't align, that's not a statement on their goodness or badness or anything like that. It's just it doesn't align. That is all. How about you, Kristi?
That's so true. I would just say if you're navigating a partnership or thinking about one, maybe take this episode and share it with them and talk about it afterwards and see, are you aligned? Where do you fall? This will be a great conversation starter. And to remind you guys, we are on YouTube, Instagram, and all podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, you can find us out there. Truly appreciate you giving us a 5-star review, liking and subscribing and sharing, because that is how we get more of this out there to our audience. And just thank you again for joining us.
A reminder, this is not tax advice, not purchasing advice, not legal advice, not fashion advice. Seriously, get professional advice when you need it. We are your friends, not your professional advisors. Thanks for joining us.